So I'm actually logging on a little early just because the last couple days there's been this weird glitch with when I log in because I'm using another software to project the slides. So one of the things that has weirdly been happening is it's almost like there's a picture from the previous live that's like frozen on the, screen for, like, a minute. So, I figured I'd come on a little bit early just to get this, all set up and make sure that we're ready to go. So, yeah, so I'm gonna kick off at 8. Actually, it's kind of a good idea. I hadn't thought about this, is to maybe log on a little bit early and just hang back for a minute. Because one of the other things that I'm noticing about myself is I'm waking up to do these on purpose. I'm creating this space also as a container for myself. And something I'm noticing is that it's like it's kind of rushed. So I've been so when I'm coming in, I'm a little bit I'm a little bit frazzled. Um I just edited a podcast episode yesterday where I was frazzled in the beginning, where I was leading in, and I could really see it. I could see where it really affects the feel in a way, and I could see how I could see my physical manifestation of it. I could see and that, came up with, like, how even, like, physical impact, and even that was impacting my voice. It was also even I to explain the emotional part is kind of weird, but also intellectually, I think I don't know about you, but, I think, one of the things about, stress on a nervous system is that it makes easy things hard and hard things impossible, and putting that stress, like any stress, even just a little bit of stress, just really diminishes and dampens just I don't know, I guess I'll call it performance for lack of a better word, but anyway, I think it might be a good idea that I start to log in. But anyway, here we are. It's 8:01. It's time to get going. Good morning. Good morning, grand rising, beautiful lovelies. So this is the Parinama practice space, and what we are doing here is we are creating a container, a space, a place, um, a practice where we show up consistently for uniting our reflexes, our emotions, and our logic. More on that. Today's topic is we're going to talk about shadows some more, and we're going to be tying together and building off of everything that we've covered so far. And let's see. Yeah. Let's see. So, yeah, I want to get back into my zone here. So, yeah, we're going to talk about fear, shame, and anger. And my aim for this is that in these 30 minutes that I can change or at least shift your relationship with a part of yourself that you consider to potentially be some of the, if not the darkest elements of what you are. So 30-minute investment. I'm very committed to this. And that's another thing about why I've been like a little bit rushed and hustled is that when I wake up in the morning, I have my ideas around this. So I start working also on the presentation of it, even if I've worked on it the night before, I have like a better version of it that comes through. So anyhow, I'm Katie. I'm Katie Bickford. If you don't know me, I wrote the Parinama book, and writing is I hesitate to take full credit for it because the collaboration level is was off the charts in terms of even just the inspiration and how um, the the process came through me, but I also worked with an incredibly talented team to produce it. So it is a labor of collaboration and love. So here you see the Parinama book. And I used to be an executive. I used to build teams all over the world, and I built revenue teams. We made a lot of money, and the my secret for it was that, in full disclosure, I wasn't overly concerned. I didn't feel very attached to business beyond the fact that it was kind of a fun game to play. I cared more. The thing where I found passion was working with teams and working with people and being able to, first of all, have my own experience by being exposed to lots of uh, different types of people. The relationship as a leader is a really specific one. And also building groups, like creating dynamics was really interesting for me. Yeah, something that yeah, no more on that for today. So to start out here, so today is a building day. So before we start, let's just do a quick check-in, checking in with how we feel physically on a scale of 1 to 10, emotionally and mentally, and just taking stock of it, just realizing that there's separate facets of how we're feeling in a given day, instead of it just being this blob of I feel this way. So just attending and paying attention to ourselves. So it's like on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you feel physically right now? I feel surprisingly good. My head doesn't feel great. But I I feel surprisingly good. Emotionally, I feel very good right now, and I think that has so physically, I'd probably give myself an 8. Um, Emotionally, I'd probably give myself an 8, 9, because I'm feeling really, optimistic and happy, and also one of the things was setting up this session where I started a little bit early, so some of the nerviness got taken off, and I'm a bit more relaxed, so even here, I'm feeling better, and also I love the, idea for how I'm gonna, present this today, so that feels really nice, and then mentally, it's, like, pretty high. I'd say if I didn't have this kind of, like, little headache, I'd probably be, like, almost, like, 10, but I'll give myself, like, 8, 5, 9, because it's like I'm thinking really clearly and the ideas are coming through really clean, and I can execute them super fast because of the condition they're in. And so as a contrary to that, it's like if, a lower sort of rating of that feeling would just be like when it's kinda like, "What?" Like that confusey feeling, and, if you wake up, you feel already overwhelmed, and you're like, "Ooh," and you think of something you have to work on or solve, and it creates this immediate sense of dread because it's like, "Oh, it's gonna drain my energy." And so a lot of these feelings have to do with, like, a relative level of, like, buoyance and energy that we have in a given moment, but and if when we feel bad, this isn't the topic for today, and we have a lot to cover, so I'm not gonna get into it. But a big thing with this methodology and this framework is that when we feel bad, that we don't try to shape it into something it's not. We build a different relationship with ourselves when we don't feel good. More on that later. So if you, have followed along in these sessions, in the practice sessions, we always start with why. We start the entire Parinama with why would you do this? Because, spoiler alert, it becomes challenging in a way that is almost passive because we're getting exposed to things, as you'll see today, that can be activating, can conjure up memories, can conjure up feelings in our body that we are actually just somatic and not necessarily have intellectual connections. So it can be hard. And so once again, back to the notion of being able to just have a healthy relationship with negative feelings. But we start with why, and then we move into there's nothing wrong with you. And the entire Parinama practice is just a prolonged case, making a case for that. And, and then after that, we talk a bit about the nervous system. We talk about the construction of the nervous system, And specifically that our nervous system is the physical feeling, the reflexes in our bodies, in our soma, the emotions in terms of how we feel, and then our brain, our intellect is part of our nervous system. So everything that is part of how what we believe, what we feel and how we move is our nervous system. And with Parinama, what we're doing is we're bringing all of these things together instead of just working on the physicality, instead of just working on the emotionality, and just, if that's a word, or working on the cognitive aspect of this, which is really the more common, to be in our heads and intellectualize things. But as I think, I imagine you found that that winds up being kind of a slippery thing. Like when you intellectualize things, that because it can slip around depending on, it's hard to nail it down. So when we bring it into the felt sense of the body, there's a grounding to it, to these notions. So that's very abstract. Let me get into it. So we're just going to do a quick walkthrough about some of the themes. So when we were talking about the nervous system, this is like one of my greatest accomplishments in terms of thumbnail creation. When we were talking about the nervous system, there were two predominant parinama-isms that we have gone through, which is the patterning tangle, which is that our early experiences and circumstances help, really shape our reflexes as adaptations for surviving or making the most of our conditions. We're going to talk more about that today, very specifically as it relates to developmental stages. So these reflexes, they get coded into our bodies, and then we create belief systems to rationalize their existence. So to make sense of them, because a lot of them don't make any sense because they were formed before we had any kind of conscious say in it. They are formed in our body before our nervous system had advanced or even sort of, like very early stage cognitive function. So we have these beliefs around why we react, these coded reactions in our bodies, and that forms what we think is reality. And so our reality is what we project into the world. We project what we expect. And as a result of that, the world responds accordingly and validates it. So that strengthens this tangle. It tightens it rather. So the more that we validate it, so it's like the reflex, we believe it's this kind of solid thing, and it's just who we are, and it's immovable, and that's reality. And then like we act in the world like that's reality, and then the world responds to somebody who thinks that's the reality. And that can be from who wants to spend time with us, if we're really reactive, how people respond to reactivity, et cetera, et cetera. But so the next part here that we're going to look at is the developmental stages of this development of the nervous system, and that very specific facets and aspects of how it feels to be alive and how it feels to be you right now in this moment. There are layers of that were formed sequentially as they related to specific stages of your development. So let me catch my breath on that. That's like very wordy and academic sounding. We're gonna drill down on this a little bit today. So we call this in Parinama, there's a corollary to chakras, but one thing about Parinama is that, and even the chakras, is that they correspond with Western psychological development. They correspond with a lot of like faith traditions, religions, other esoteric systems. This notion has a very strong universal component to it. Oh my gosh, excuse me. Um, and so what we see here is, like, I call it hubs because they're organizing principles for for like taking in like a particular aspect of ourselves, housing it, and then also expressing it. So a hub. And as you may remember, we've got shadows. So for each of these stages of development, there's a shadow that emerges. And so today we'll look at fear, guilt, shame, we're actually not gonna look at guilt today. I kind of intermittently mix guilt and shame, with the second hub, but as we'll talk about today, I think, I don't know, well, like, it's sort of a mix. It really mixes in between the baby and the toddler, but, yeah. So if the and of course these so we will specifically be looking at the shadows that are connected to aspects of ourself that were developed before we had conscious awareness. So and these are also the shadows that we tend to find sort of the dark like believe as the darkest parts of ourselves because of how they act and our associations with them. So once again, the tangle. Our belief systems around these particular reflexes is there's a darker unknown in this because the foundation was shaped so early in our lives. So before we jump in, I just want to take a breath here. Take a little moment. So, because that was a lot. Yeah, even though we've already covered some of that stuff, maybe this is the first time you're watching it. That was a lot. And so, if we had interaction, I'd want to ask questions. But one of the things that's been really challenging about this format is that there is no interaction. So, I can't gauge where you're at with this. So, that's my keeps being my dream with this is that there'll be like discourse and you can um kind of check in with me with where you're at with and feedback your responses to this. So even if you're watching this right now, if you can put in the comments, at 17 minutes, like how you feel. Like, so do you feel, on a scale of 1 to 10, do you feel kind of overloaded with information right now? Um, so I just want to take like a little breath to let it sink in before we jump in here and talk about the stage the stage of development, the light and the shadow of it, and then how it relates to the tangle. So I'm just gonna do a little inhale through the nose, hold at the top, and then exhale through the mouth. Because something I find is that I really want these to be concise, but at the same time, it's also a matter of figuring out how much information makes sense for these and how much the exercises should be incorporated. But in the early stages of presenting this, there's just some frameworking that I want to establish. So it's just figuring out like how to effectively do this. I'm not an educator, so this is, a learning experience. So let's start here. And just as a reminder, mm, so here we have the tangle. So now we're incorporating. So this is where we're starting to build. This is the buildable aspect of this. And I think with the early stages of Parinama, there's an overwhelm thing, which is that it's like there's so much here, but it really starts to all come together with some very repeating and expanding themes that build momentum. So here what we have is we're looking at the stage of development, the corresponding shadow, and we're going to talk a little bit about how that arises as both a positive and a negative. Now, this is the part about when we're talking about shadows, and this is when I'm saying I want to change your relationship with these things. I want to have a shot at this, at shifting this. Um, is that a shadow is an adaptation. I'm like trying to move into frame here. So with fear, specifically, I'm going to talk about fear in this case, is that fear is about survival. Fear, so all of our shadows, when they are in the extraordinary aspect of them, because they're also naturally arising extraordinary aspects of our being, which is that we have these inherent reflexes that arise and respond and protect us in situations, even when even when we can't think or make the decisions for ourselves, that we have fear that keeps us safe. We have shame that keeps us, from becoming harmful to other people. And we have anger, which keeps us standing up for ourselves. Anger keeps us from being like suppressed or having our dignity undermined. So it's this naturally arising feeling that comes up when that's happening. Shame is a naturally arising feeling that comes up when we've caused harm to people. And fear is a naturally arising reflex and even feeling that has to do with keeping yourself physically safe. So the first hub is about our physical safety, and let's talk about it. So our first hub is infant. It's established, so our first hub is all about physical, like, the physical sense of security and safety in the world. And in the first hub, this is infant. So this is the end of gestation and probably into 6 months, and it's the establishment of what it feel like, whether the world is a safe place or not. And what that means is, it's like, how does it feel? Is it responsive? Are my needs met? Is it safe? Am I going to, are my physical needs going to be met and responded to? And this is a deep conditioning that we have within ourselves. And so what you need in this stage is very simple. It's responsive caregiving, being fed when you're hungry. There's not really, we're going to talk about emotional capacity in the next one, and like how that starts to play into things. But in the first hub, it's very simple. It's like, is this world a place where people are responsive and caring? And are my needs met consistently? And so what that demands, so one of the things to flip the camera on this, like on a phone, is that now think about what that demands from a parent. So it is an extraordinary demand to have a newborn, and to be basically operating like, addressing the absolute, arising needs of another human being at any given moment. And it really helps when your caregivers have a support system around them. And in like a nuclear family, that's like a father, but in other cultures, you have like larger family systems, and in other cultures, you have even communities. So you have a lot of stress being put on a single individual person to be able to provide this notion. And that person may be stressed and strained and having a hard time being responsive because their own needs feel so depleted. So what you need in that moment, in that period of time in your life, is a person who can be is in the position to be, and we're not moralizing this, because when we start moralizing it, it doesn't mean that we don't hold people accountable for falling short. In story time around, for me, my own caregiving in this period of life was super intermittent. And one of the things that I found really disturbing about learning is that, when my mother had told me she thought I was in a power struggle with her as an infant, so she would sort of like try to assert her dominance by leaving me crying, and like, because she thought I was trying to manipulate her. So, and that's heavy. So, trigger warning in reverse on that. But that's a thing. So when you're looking at understanding how deeper patterning was formed, that's an example of what happens, is that, so the fear is going to actually create an activation that supports getting what you need. So whether that's crying louder, it's behaviors that will like assert needs being met. So, and we'll get more into this in later with the different styles of adaptation, but it's like we adapt to our environment to get the best response that we can get from it. So, do we cry louder and become, it's like, oh, okay, that can't be ignored? Or do we become quieter because that actually makes us less overwhelming to the caregiver and they somehow could feel like we're more manageable that way? So, I mean, that's just one example. But the thing is, the fear, that kind of anxiety of whether you're going to survive or not, as a natural arising aspect of ourself, to be loved and to be adored and to be appreciated, is that arising, that natural arising keeps us safe and helps us adapt so that we survive. When it becomes maladaptive, we get fixed, pervasive, and constant behaviors that don't change and aren't responsive to the environment they're in. And even kind of building on that, not only not responsive to the environment they're in, they tend to seek out familiar behaviors where that adaptation or that relationship with fear makes sense and is in context. So that's once again, projection and a validation. So once again, we can see how early experiences shape reflexes, belief systems, form a reality we project, and then we experience a validation from that. So the takeaway for that I'd like to, present here is that your fear, when it arises, there's all these conflicting narratives culturally about what fear is. It's bad, it's good, it's bad, it's good. Hypervigilance, never being able to physically feel safe, is a sign of a somatic conditioning that we can work on here in Parinama, that you can work on in all sorts of different disciplines, but just something to really pay attention to, where I'm going to spend more time on this than I have allotted for budget, so I'm probably going to go over a little bit. But the thing about it is that, let's see, yeah. So one of the things is like once fears is like being managed intellectually, there can be an overriding sensibility about solving it intellectually, like stockpiling money, having like physical safeties. And so, but one of the things we'll find is that if we do not have this very deep reflexive conditioning addressed, where we're doing the practices where we're grounding ourselves, or in the chapter 4 with the techniques and exercises, where we're bringing ourselves into the reflex of feeling physically safe, feeling physically grounded, feeling consistency, feeling boundary in our body, then there's just no amount of sort of intellectual rationalization to create safety. It's a feeling. And one of the things about having that feeling is that you can find out that you need a lot less than you think you do, which is also like a whole thing. This is obviously a larger topic. And to that end, we will be discussing this. It comes up. This is not the end of this. This is pretty much like chapter 4, the first hub in a nutshell. So let's move on to talk about our little baby. And let's talk about, so we're going to talk about what you need in this stage, what your caregiver needs, and really how that interacts with the creation of this so-called shadow. So as a baby, you're starting to connect with your caregiver. It's not socialization yet. You're starting to connect with the people that are providing care for you. And so this is still tied to survival, but also, one of the things about considering survival to be really hardcore, there's also joy. There's also the survival of the aspect of connection. And this is the stage where we begin the foundation of our emotional literacy. So when we goo goo gaga or do something cute, how do our caregivers respond to us? So what a caregiver needs, once again, in this stage is their own emotional literacy and capacity is going to be a foundation for being able to extend it to us. They're also going to need to be supported and cared for. um, have the additional energy, have the support around them so that they have that additional energy so they're not tapped out. So when the baby is doing something adorable, it isn't just like, oh, another thing, like it's back to overwhelm and stress, making hard things, like making easy things hard and hard things impossible. So and so there's that part of what a caregiver needs in this stage, but there's another thing too, which is they need their own level of being able to like feel mature enough to respond. And back to the notion in the first hub, which is being able to be relatively selfless and understanding that the baby is absolutely needing all the attention. And this isn't a time at all for the baby to be like, contributing to the relationship in the sense of, doing things proactively to manage your well-being. So this is like pleasure, movement, emotions, nurture, and we learn what our emotions are by how the world responds to them. And being taught what they are. So this is syncing up with the world around us, and at this stage it's a very small world. It's a syncing up, no, like kind of thing where you're like happy and oh happy, and so oh you're happy, or oh you're sad. So you're being taught what your emotions are. The other thing is you're being taught that when you have them, that the response that the world gives to them is what's teaching you what they are. So this moves in, this is about shame. So an example about this, an example of shame would be, so yesterday I was listening to somebody to speak about how when they were a kid, they actually, this is a total full circle thing. Um, and so I'm going to go over probably about 7 minutes. So it's 8:30 right now. When they were a kid, they have a very core memory of being sick, and they were throwing up in the bathroom, and they kept having to flush the toilet. It was late at night, and they were a little kid, little kid, and their mom didn't come to their aid. And in the morning, the mother berated the child for keeping them up by flushing the toilet with no expressed concern about their health and their well-being. And so that was a very core memory, and it created very deep shame. So as you can see, the thing is like for you being your humaning, that it's like the creation of like of being like, oh, when I'm myself, there's something wrong with that. So and to contrary to that, and this is kind of a weird example, but this morning when I was getting ready to come on here, like I stepped on something gross in my kitchen, and I realized my cat had thrown up. And my first response to it was just immediately concern. And I realized how different that is from what I received as a child growing up. But I immediately was like, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" Like, immediate. But that has to do with the fact that I have bandwidth and emotional capacity, and I have tools, and, there's all sorts of other things related, and I'm a party number. But, like, so that's one of the things when you think about, like, guilt or shame about your behaviors and what they are, is that, so going back into this model here, is that guilt, if we do something harmful to somebody, that icky feeling you get, like when you say something mean, or you think like, yeah, if you overstep or you do something crappy or you disregard someone, and it's kind of like guilt and anger, little guilt and shame and anger are two sides of the same coin, where guilt is a sort of, when it's in the light, in the little sunny version of this, it's self-correcting, because that icky feeling doesn't go away until we do something to apologize or make right of it. And the shadow of guilt is like we're guilty about everything. It's like I ate the wrong thing. I feel guilty. I shouldn't have done this. I'm sleeping too much. I'm lazy. So we get these deep and like chronic senses of guilt and shame that are like everything we do is like we shouldn't be doing it. And so when we're tracing that back into understanding, like this is once again can't be intellectualized. This is deeply coded into our physical bodies. So that sense of like, yeah, I just, I shouldn't be doing that, or I'm in the wrong place, or oh, sorry, 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 and like I'm being lazy, or I'm being inconvenient. I'm sorry, is this too much for you? And tracing that back to that is a response to something that happened before we can remember it happening, but it tends to be really evocative on whatever level. And even if, whether it happened chronically or just occasionally, I have some folks who had just like a couple things happen that are deeply embedded. And then you folks who just had parents that were just absolutely like incapable of being present. So as you can see here, these stages are a little bit, with the shame and the guilt. There's a little bit of an overlap here. And the thing with guilt is more tied to having a reaction to sort of an event. Shame is where it becomes like this pervasive thing, like there's something wrong with me, like I did that thing, and so it's like I'm this thing, that and that is just it's just not true. Like the only place that shame actually has a spot, and we're gonna move into this now. The only place that shame, that overwhelming, icky feeling the only place for it is when we do something really cruel to somebody, or we do something thoughtless and we realize that we caused harm. Maybe we like hurt somebody because we were angry. I mean, like it all works, but or just we were tired and our emotions and our nervous system bandwidth was outspent. So shame, that overwhelming icky feeling it's there. Its purpose is to make right of it. It's like an internal justice system. If we are overridden by constant shame, we can't feel the naturally arising response to it's naturally occurring consequence. When it's just shame, like, "Oh, I'm fat. Oh, I wish I made more money. Oh, my title isn't high enough. Oh, I, don't live in the right place. Oh, look, I have these bags under my eyes, and oh, like, my nails need to be done, or, I wish my feet were a little more this, and I don't get to go on, like everyone else is going on vacation. I feel like it makes me look like I'm not like blah 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 blah. Like my Instagram looks stupid. I mean, you literally could do it. Like, my car sucks. My car's dirty. It looks so gross and it's disgusting. I'm sorry that you have to ride in it. Oh my gosh, I don't have enough gas in my tank because I was too lazy to put gas in my car. Oh my gosh, like I haven't gotten my oil changed. Oh my gosh, my house is so gross right now. I need to change my sheets. I haven't done laundry yet. Oh my God, that's so disgusting. Oh, and there's dishes in my sink, and I ate too much last night. Like, you look at this, it literally is like it's not true, and it can be anything. It's so when this is a pervasive inner state, how the hell are you going to be able to feel it when you harm somebody and that shame naturally arises? You hurt somebody's feelings or you say something mean. In fact, one of the things that can happen is if we're in chronic states of shame, this can correspond with anger, because the overuse of shame on a child is also reducing their dignity and suppressing them. So one so these can be tied together. So one of the things is that the anger can create behavior where we're meaner to people, and when we're overridden with shame, we just have a really hard time feeling that response that would make it more self-corrective. So here we're looking at just back to this point, is that we're talking about why these shadows are not to be banished. They're actually to be turned, like, right sized and made adaptive, responsive, and dynamic again, versus being fixed, pervasive, constant states of protection that relate to us surviving and adapting to our initial environments of origin. So last but not least here, and I can't, I wish I was going, I was a little bit more succinct here, but here we have what we have is the toddler. And so look at those little pictures. Like one of the things about the toddler age is it's like the terrible twos. Like this is where the third hub is being developed. Individualism, power, will, autonomy. And you just look at those little body, you just look at like a toddler when they're doing their thing. They're like independent and they're bossy and they're me, me, me. And there's there's a quality for parents, and it's actually pretty common that parents are just waiting for this stage to play out because it's hard. It's a very hard stage, especially when we're talking about a parent whose own capacity is very limited in a number of ways. So whether that's that their support system is lower, so the energy they have is lower, that's also a significant condition for what we're going to talk about, or just that they don't have a lot of capacity in this hub because of their own upbringing and how they were taught. It's usually a combination of both, no doubt. But looking here, so the toddler this is the first assertion of individuality. So with a baby, it's kind of like goo goo gaga and huggy and emotional attunement. And now you've got one of the first the first turn of this sort of the ebb and flow of independence and belonging, and this is that assertion of it. And because it's really difficult, and because the cognitive faculties are like not fully developed, a kid at this stage is a lot of energy to manage. So shame culturally is overused in the form of punishment and discipline, because at this age a kid can't actually really understand too much of what's happening. I mean, they can, I don't want it, but they also need to understand limits. So that's another, so this is like, it's a really nuanced, complicated thing. So I don't want to talk too much about children's development because I'm just I'm not a scholar. But I just want to talk about thinking about that time in your body and in yourself, which is a time of feeling that emerging sense of like, hey, I'm here, mine, and this is what I like, and this is what I want to do, and this is me, and this is fun. This feels really good to like exert my power. I'm powerful. Feels good to be powerful. It feels good to be able to do things. It feels good to help. It feels good to build things. And like accomplishment is this like pride and just this very particular kind of energy, which is like a lot. And so you've got this suppression of that with obedience and a lot of discipline, which winds up being shaming. And it's very subtle and it's very pervasive. It's why there's so much shame. And even parents don't know that they did it, because I don't know how well this is totally understood. And last but not least, I'm just going to raise anger. So anger, look at this. So once again, like look at these little kiddos. And the thing is, when you are beginning to express yourself, or when you want to do something, you're like, I'm going to build this. And then somebody starts building it for you or says, no, you can't do it. Or you can't do that. That feeling that arises in you is anger. And that is a self-correcting, because it's like, you are wrong. I can do this. And so the thing with anger, and also in a larger societal context, if you are constantly, if you are in an oppressed, um, like social segment, if like for anyone dealing with racism, misogyny, economic oppression, like that feeling of just being constantly undermined generates this reflexive response to that, which is like, no, you're wrong. But the thing is, if that anger cannot be expressed, so once again, for a child, it's like they're like a tantrum, like, but they're very quickly, it's like you're too old for that. The thing about expressing emotions of frustration where they come out, if they stay in, they become trapped as rage. And when they become trapped as rage, they just become like chronic frustration and agitation, chronic, like reflexive aggravation with people. And so, but looking at our anger as the source of it being very sacred, it's this very beloved aspect of ourselves that has to do with upholding our dignity and our integrity, and it's standing on that. And the thing is, when we don't have the right outlets, we don't have the right tools, when we're not addressing it as a somatic physical phenomenon in addition to emotional cognitive, we don't reach in deep enough, and it keeps operating our lives. So that is it for today. I will just say that the takeaway message for this is, once again, there's nothing wrong with you. This practice is all about coming to a place where we understand ourselves. We're taking accountability for ourselves in a very particular way, but we're reducing the shame and the annihilation, or even just the acceptance of aspects of ourselves that were formed before we had any type of context or conscious capability to be able to override or make decisions about. It's just all reflexes arising that got coded. And so the tangle, and the takeaway today is going back to the tangle, is that these are what we think are these shadows and these dark aspects of ourselves. They are malleable. They are malleable. So the thing about the tangle is it creates a forcing belief that these qualities of chronic fearfulness, of chronic shame and guilt, of underlying rage that we don't want anybody to know that maybe we're housing, or feelings of agitation and aggravation, that these are all aspects of ourselves that are malleable. We can actually somatically work with them. We can cognitively work with them. We can emotionally work with them. And that's what we're doing in Parinama, with understanding these aspects of ourselves and then working with them. So we're first working with understanding, and then we're folding in the somatic physical practices to start reaching back to that aspect of ourselves that was like wanting and waiting for somebody to be able to help us constructively manage the situations that and the circumstances that we're in. So this is a reaching back to this very like deep, sacred, sweet aspect of yourself. Like kind of you're the hero you've been waiting for kind of moment. And this is why, when we get into, full circle of why we do this, is that when we address these things, we change everything about what it feels like to be alive in your life. You can change everything. The things that feel fixed are malleable. And so, as a result of that, I just want to say thank you for coming along. And please, any feedback or comments are absolutely welcomed. My goal is to make these sessions just much more accessible and usable for you. And I really relish the opportunity. So until next time, tomorrow, when we discuss boundaries, we'll discuss the 7 boundaries as they relate to these hubs. We'll get as far as we can. I'm going to try to keep it closer to 30 minutes. So until then, thank you so much, and I'll see you soon. Bye.